Rick, thanks for being here today. That's the first thing I wanted to say to you. And I also want to mention, before you start telling us of your experiences here, that there are many parts of the country where people who come up in certain rural areas of the South or in certain inner city areas are applauded for the fact that they come up through the system, graduate, go out into the world, and then come back and spend a good amount of their lives in that community. You've done that here in Brentwood. I mean, you've been here a good many years, all the way through the system, haven't you?
I started in the 6th grade in Brentwood.
In 6th grade. Okay.
6th grade, I guess that was 12 years old or so.
Yeah.
And came all the way through. I can remember going to 6th grade in what was the annex. It's now part of the Brentwood Public Library, the history part of the Brentwood Public Library. I was actually in classes there.
Hold on.
Came up.
Oh, don't go there yet. Let me first of all, your name is Rick, but what's your full name?
Richard Edwards.
And where does the name come from? How did you happen to be given the Edwards part of it?
Oh, that's my family name.
I'm thinking Richard Edwards. I'm thinking of it as a middle name. Do you have a middle name?
Ernest.
Okay.
Ernest is my father's name.
That's what I was thinking of asking.
Right.
Okay. And the Edwards is, of course. Do you have any
Well, it goes back to England. My father's family is, from England. My mother's family is more directly from Ireland. My father's family was here for a few generations. My mother's parents came over from Ireland. She was Margaret Madeline Doyle. And
are you aware of the family history to some extent?
My parents died. My mother died when I was 19. My father when I was 20.
Oh, wow.
So not too aware. I still have an aunt who fills me in on information about the past, but not going back too many generations.
Okay. Do you have a nickname growing up, or a pet name in the family?
No.
Any brothers or sisters?
I have 2 brothers. Pete, who was also a student here and also on the track team here, and he's now the assistant principal at Patchogue Medford High School.
Oh.
And a brother, Chuck, who teaches in Louisiana, teaches French on television.
What's the birth order of you in this?
I'm the oldest.
I see.
Pete's number 2, and Chuck is the baby of the family, and he teaches on television.
Really?
In many schools. I understand they're starting to do this in New York too. Schools that don't have very many students. They may have 3 kids taking French. That's it. They can't hire a French teacher with only 3 kids taking French. But if they have a television studio and hookup, he might be teaching to 10 schools at one time, 3 or 4 kids in each, and they have a telephone hookup as well, so he can answer questions and ask questions. And that's what he teaches out of a studio.
Were you the role model for both of your brothers to go into education?
Oh, I don't know. We all became teachers. I don't know if that's true.
Wow. I'm jumping ahead to a question I want to ask you later, but this seems like a natural time to ask it. What influenced you to become a teacher or an educator?
Well, some of the teachers I had did. Ruth Rosenthal in particular. You know Ruth well.
Yes.
Maybe the best teacher I've ever seen. Wow. She's a wonderful teacher. Absolutely wonderful teacher.
Who is now serving on the board here.
She's now on the Board of Education here, but I know her far better as a teacher.
Yes.
Maybe one of the best Brentwood's ever had.
What a nice statement to be able to make about somebody's influence on you. Tell me about your children.
I have 4 children. Dawn, who is in investments, stockbroking.
Dawn is a contemporary of my daughter. I remember Dawn when they were
That's right.
little. Yeah.
In fact, they knew each other, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah. And she has 1 child, 2-year-old Nicholas, my grandson, and another one coming in February, coming up.
Where's Dawn living?
She lives in Croton-on-the-Hudson.
Oh, okay. You get a chance to see the grandchildren very often?
In fact, I saw, sometimes. I saw him yesterday. It was my baby, my youngest daughter's graduation.
Father's Day, after all.
It was Father's Day, and it was my daughter's high school graduation. So we had a big party at my house. Okay. So I got to see all my children. Number 2 child is Stephen, who graduated from Binghamton and is in the insurance business. He graduated with a degree, dual major in environmental science and geology. So he's in the environmental part of this insurance company where they insure oil sites, oil dumps, places like that, over the insurance to cover disasters that could happen.
And Dawn, you said, was in the investment, was in
Dawn is making all kinds of money
stockbroker
in stocks and
Does
bonds.
she commute to the city?
No, she doesn't. In fact, she moved to Croton-on-the-Hudson because the woman who owns the company has the company. It's right nearby at Croton-on-the-Hudson. So she does. She commutes, drives 15 minutes to work.
That's great.
Yeah.
And
my third son, my third child, my second son, Ryan, graduated from School of Visual Arts, and he designs websites now. He works for a company that Bullseye Art is the name of the company. They design websites, so he's into
cutting edge stuff. That's right there. Wow.
And of course, I mentioned Megan, my baby, just graduated from high school yesterday.
Not a baby anymore.
No, not anymore.
And where did she graduate from high school?
Smithtown.
Okay. Well, do you see any qualities or traits in your kids, Rick, that you recognize as having been in the family for a few years? I know that there's always a family face that you can trace through photographs and through, but what about the qualities and the personalities and the traits or talents?
Wow, they're all very different.
Really, yeah, sounds that way.
Very different. Not a single one of them is like the other. They're four very different personalities.
And their own people. I gather that you didn't have it wasn't as a result of your expertise that somebody becomes a stockbroker or somebody becomes a website designer or whatever. That's a very individual kind of thing. Yeah. Tell me just briefly, if you can, about your grandchild, the one that you visited yesterday, about the personality of what you see
Nicholas he's a 2-year-old.
Okay.
And that says a lot about him.
Yes, it does.
And he's a boy, a 2-year-old boy. So he's constant action and energy and running around and never sits still. So,
where were you born?
I was born in the Bronx. Moved to Westbury when I was about 4 years old, and lived in Westbury. Went to school in Westbury, and then it moved to Brentwood when I was around 12 years old.
What are some of the earliest memories you have, Rick, growing up prior to the move from the Bronx? While you were living in the Bronx, do you have any memories?
I have no memories really of the Bronx at all. I really don't have any memories. I can remember a lot of things in Westbury.
That's where it came
Friends I had in Westbury. In fact, I even see a couple of
them.
Do
you? I was going to ask you, who were your friends growing up?
Georgie Muller and Brian McQuiggan and a couple of guys that I knew back then.
And you still see some of them?
Occasionally.
Oh, you're fortunate to have that kind of a contact.
Occasionally, yeah.
Those are the people who really know you.
Going back,
as you were, and some of the qualities that you still have that you've forgotten about that they will remind you of.
Ah, yes.
Well, now you've told me your mother's history or your mother's heritage and her maiden name. Did you know your maternal grandparents?
No, I had one grandparent alive when I was alive. My father's father was alive, and that was it. My other grandparents were gone.
Yeah. Kids don't realize very often how lucky they are to make the connection with that generation. Not everybody has that opportunity to talk to them or to have memories of them.
That's right.
Do you remember what your mother was like when you were a child? What the memories you have of her as a person?
Well, let's see. My mother has been gone for
since you were 19
34
or 20
years.
Yeah.
But 35 years.
But as a child,
it's hard. It's hard to remember my mother. But she was home. She was as most of the women were at that time, a homemaker.
Yeah.
She was very caring and loving.
Yeah. Okay. Nurturing. That was the role.
She was
of that generation.
Yeah.
And not that it isn't today, but I mean particularly we remember our mothers that way. And your father? What memory?
My father worked for an insurance company as well.
There it is. There it is.
Yeah, maybe that's the connection with my son. He worked for an insurance company. He commuted into the city. One of the reasons I became a teacher is I watched my father commute into the city every day, and I said,
"No thanks.
I'll never do that."
Yeah. Those are the kinds of influences that I guess sometimes have the reverse effect on people's directions. Now, let me see. Where are we here? Adult influences in your life, Rick, other than mom and dad. Any that you can recall that were important
Um,
as a youngster?
Dick Simmons, who was a phys ed teacher here, and he was my track coach.
Aha.
And he's a retired Brentwood teacher.
Yes.
Was a wonderful influence on me.
You know, I'm prompted to say this because you remind me of it. How often we tell young teachers to be aware of the fact that there are students who they see during the day for whom they may be the most significant adult in their lives.
That's
outside
true.
Of their
And
parents.
it's especially true of people like coaches and advisors who spend, they don't just spend 45 minutes between the bells with you. They spend hours after school and hours with you in doing things that go beyond the scope of what a classroom can do. You know, they deal with putting you under a lot of pressure, and they deal with getting the best out of you. And then they'll spend 3 hours a day with you instead of that short period of time. Sometimes it's very much one-on-one. I've learned that as an advisor to organizations here, to myself, that the closest connections you have with kids are in those kinds of things.
But you also mentioned Ruth Rosenthal and the fact that she, as a classroom teacher, had a profound influence on you.
But I don't think I'm unique. I think she had a profound effect on an awful lot of people. I don't think too many of the kids in classes that I had with her would disagree. She was a very...
At what point were you aware of the fact that, you know, I might like to become a teacher?
Really, it was in retrospect. Looking back at teachers I had, I said, you know, that's not a bad thing. I said, I would like to do that myself. And then when I had the opportunity, I thought coming back here, too, would be a great idea.
Yeah. What about now, talking about your earliest memories having been when you moved to Westbury? Do you remember the room where you slept as a kid?
Yeah.
Can you describe it?
It was a Cape Cod, the house, and it was, when we moved in there originally, I guess the attic part of it was unfinished. So we had it finished. It had ships on the wallpaper. I can remember that. And I shared it with my brother. Shared the room with my brother.
So did I. Did the same thing, so I can relate to that.
And then when my...
Did the street have any trees on it when you moved out to Westbury? Some of those developments were new. At that point.
Didn't have, right. It was pretty new. It was pretty new. It was a small cape. We moved out when my grandfather moved in with us. That's one of the reasons we moved to Brentwood. My grandfather left his place in the city, moved in with us, and then we needed a larger house. I go back to the house in Westbury now, and it seems so different, you know. The long blocks I used to walk on to go to the candy store, and they're just tiny little blocks. And what I used to think was the enormous candy store is just a little tiny store, and now it's a pizza place. Right.
The perspective of youth and the perspective of adulthood, very different.
Yes.
Even with regard to that. What about family chores as you were growing up? Did you have anything you were responsible for doing?
My father was a great one for having us tend to the lawn and do things like that, which is why I don't think I like doing that now. I live in a condo, and I enjoy watching somebody else take care of my lawn.
Yes. Do you remember the first time you were ever paid for doing a job? Your first paying job?
Probably as a paper boy. I used to deliver newspapers for the Long Island Press.
Okay.
In fact, the neighborhood right in front of the high school was my route.
Really?
All those old houses right in front of the high school here. And it was a really nice route. A lot of the people there had been there for many years. Some of the widows that lived in there, I used to have to sneak up to the house and drop the paper there, because if they saw me coming, they'd invite, oh, come on in, have some milk. I have a piece of cake. I baked a cake last night. And they'd make me sit, and because nobody came the whole day. And they'd have me sit for a half hour. And then I'd get home, and my mother would be upset with me because I had cake at 3 houses and I couldn't eat my dinner.
Oh, yes.
You know?
You probably did that route on a bicycle, too, didn't you?
Right. Yeah. I did it on a bicycle.
And a canvas sack with the papers that you had individually folded.
Right. And I
No
used to
plastic
think,
bags around the paper.
no, I had to fold them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And either toss them or place them.
I think I would toss them. Yeah.
Yeah, unless
And I thought
you didn't want to
Newsday.
make a noise to alert the resident that you were.
I thought Newsday was the Newsday carriers I envied because they didn't have a Sunday paper in those days. Newsday didn't have a Sunday paper. Long Island Press had a Sunday paper. So my friends who delivered Newsday were off on Sunday, and I had to deliver the fattest, thickest paper on Sunday.
Oh, jeez. Do you remember family holidays or any particular family holidays being the most fun?
Well, we got together. I had cousins. We were very close to my cousins who lived in Bethpage. My cousin Bill is my age, and my cousin Bob is my brother's age. So we had the four boys would get together, and then my younger brother and my cousin Chris, we would get together. Yeah, I remember those holidays getting together with my cousins and my aunts.
That was
almost Easter and Christmas and 4th of July.
Right. Was on what side of the family was that? On your father?
My mother's side.
Your mother's side of the family.
My father had a brother, but no children. There were no nephews or nieces from my father's side.
So that there was more contact growing up with your mother's side
Always.
of the family. Yeah.
Right. And my one surviving relative now is my Aunt Ruth, who lives in Virginia Beach, and she's my mother's sister.
So you spent your adolescent and your teenage years in Brentwood growing up. What'd you do on a typical summer day? How'd you spend your day?
Oh, we had all kinds of things we could do.
You frequently hear kids say, there's nothing to do, nothing to do.
Oh, we used to get in trouble because we'd go play football at St. Joseph's Academy. There was a wonderful open area in the cemetery where the nuns are buried.
Yes.
And we didn't quite understand why the nuns didn't like us playing football in their cemetery. We thought it was look how nice the grass is. Yeah. It's nicely sure. So the caretaker would come by and throw us out. But the St. Joseph's Academy was a great place to go. They had, they used to, all the girls that went there had horses. They had stables, and they used to have their own milk cows there.
Is that what that big barn is off Brentwood Road?
Right.
Those were the stables? And...
We used to, they had a holiday there where they would have a horse show, and it was only open to the families of the girls who were going there. So my friend Jerry McCarthy and I, we'd put on a sport jacket and a tie, and we'd walk in and make believe we were part of the families. Great. And they had food out and all that kind of stuff. We'd just help ourselves, and we'd watch them. Nobody knew that we weren't part of this, so we would sneak into that and see how the rich girls lived. And that's what. And
that's a fact. That was a private academy, private school, and
only wealthy people.
And only wealthy people. Yeah. Were there special memories of certain times of the year growing up in Brentwood, and at that time, winter, for example, or you were interested in sports. So, what about football season? Do you have any memories associated with certain seasons?
I did. Well, it's very different from now. If you're talking about sports, we used to go out to the football games when I was in high school, and the stands were filled, and most of the students in the school would come to the football games. Now, I've gone by on Saturdays and looked out at the football field, and there was a game going on, and there might be 50 people in the stands watching the football game.
Account for that. How come that is? Why is that?
There was much more school spirit in those days. The kids really got involved in school activities.
It was more the center of
much more
family life.
Now it isn't. Now too many kids have early release. They come here, they go through the motions of being here and out. And the job outside is very important to them, and other things outside the school are very important to them. But the school is not as important. It is to a few kids, but fewer all the time.
What kind of kid were you? Describe yourself in those years.
I was a jock.
Okay.
We had the guys, I guess it broke, we had the nerds, of course, and the jocks, and of course we had the guys who would roll up their camels in their sleeves. You know, we had those guys who would work on their cars after school all the time. And that was about it. We had those groups. We had fewer different kinds of groups than they have today. And I was on the teams. My passion was basketball, and I was not good. I was tall, so they stayed with me, and I got cut from the team in my senior year.
Really?
Because they just couldn't
Yeah.
get the klutziness out of me.
Okay.
And the sport that I didn't enjoy that much, which was track, because it was a lot of hard work, I excelled at. I was very good. I was a county champion.
Oh.
So I ran cross country and track. This is where Dick Simmons came into my life.
Yes.
As coach.
Yes.
You know? And he kind of showed, as a coach, I think coaches, good ones, do that. They get more out of you than you ever think you can give. You don't think you can do certain things, and they show you can.
Yeah,
and
well
they
said. Right.
prepare you to do it.
Outside of the interest and the passion you had for sports, were there other pastimes or hobbies or
Girlfriends. I always had a
yeah,
girlfriend.
Yeah. All-American boy. There
And that
it is,
interferes with the sports too. And Mr.
Oh, yes.
Simmons taught me that. Okay, a great story. I would run the quarter mile and the half mile. Okay, and one time I didn't get to practice on time because I was with my girlfriend. Okay, and he said, and the next day we had a relay race. It was supposed to be a progressive relay over at LaSalle Military Academy. And the first leg was the quarter, and I was supposed to run the half. Then there was a 3/4 mile leg, and then the last guy runs a full mile. I was all set. We get up to the starting line, and the coach says, we're switching this around. He says, you're running the mile. He says, maybe next time you'll forget about your girlfriend and you'll get here on time. So, yeah, he was tough. I can remember him, we had the county championships the day before the prom, the day after the prom. And he said, you can go to the prom. He said, I'm calling your house at midnight. If you're not there, you're not running.
Wow.
That was Mr. Simmons.
Yes.
So I had to be home. I had to take my girlfriend home, and I had to get home to answer that. And the phone rang right at midnight. Ding. It did for me, and it did for other guys who were in the same situation.
You mentioned before, and I cut you short when you started to talk about your early memories of Brentwood. What was the first school that you attended when you moved here?
It was the Annex, which is now, they've turned it into part of the Brentwood Public Library.
Oh, yes.
That
yes.
old stone building there.
Yes. Well, what would that have been? What grade would that have been?
Sixth grade.
Sixth grade.
And
Didn't that go like 6, 7, 8 or something at that time?
Yeah,
A couple
I
of
think so.
grades?
I was only there 1 year because then the R.O.B.S building was built.
Uh-huh.
And the R.O.B.S building was 7 through 12.
Oh, was that right?
It started out 7 through 12. They had
You mean to say you were the first, one of the first classes?
I was the first.
The first class in the R.O.B.S building?
In the R.O.B.S, yeah. We moved into the R.O.B.S at 7th grade.
Do you keep contact with any of the people who you were in school with that year? Have you ever seen any of them again?
Well, they graduated with me. I see
Are any
Eli
of them,
Acosta.
I was going to say, are any of them teachers?
Yeah,
And
Eli
yes.
Acosta graduated high school with me, and I do see other people who graduated maybe a year before me or a year after me. In fact, we have a track team reunion. Started out a couple of years ago, and we're meeting, in fact, this Saturday. We get together with Mr. Simmons and guys that ran on the track team.
Do you have, Dick, do you have any memories, Rick, of those first years in the R.O.B.S building, of things that happened?
Very different from the R.O.B.S building today. We used to have hall patrol, students who would stand in the hall, and you had to walk on the right side of the hall only. If you didn't, the hall patrol would tell you, you got to stay to the right. And when the warning bell came, they would move you on to class. So everybody was in the class on time. We paid attention to the hall monitors. They had some authority. I don't think that would work today.
No, I don't think it would. The numbers of people in the high school were different also.
Right. My graduating class had 225, I think. So I would guess the first graduating class had fewer than 200 kids.
What other schools then followed? Well, you graduated from R.O.B.S.
Right.
There was no Sonderling at that time. It was just the R.O.B.S
Right.
building. And what did you do then when you got out of high school?
I went off to Syracuse University on a track scholarship. Spent 1 year there and came home after my mother and father died. And I worked for a
that's
year.
right. Your mother and dad both died
Within a year of each other.
Right when you finished high school, or when you were just in
just
your
after
early
I
years of
finished
college?
my first year of college.
That must have been a very difficult time. They died in separate And
Right. My mother died of cancer, which I think stressed my father to the point
oh my
that
gosh,
he died of
yes.
a heart attack.
Oh wow. Yeah. All right, so then you say you went to Syracuse and you
Right. Then I came back, and then I finished up Suffolk and went to Adelphi and finished from Adelphi, and then went on. Then I started, well, when I graduated from there, I got the teaching job here and went to school. Night started at St. John's University and got tired of driving there and finished up my master's at Stony Brook.
I want to hold off for a couple of minutes asking you about how you heard about the openings here or who interviewed you. We'll do that in a moment, but let me go back for a moment to just ask if you remember any of your elementary school teachers. If you mentioned the high school teachers you remember.
Well, I can remember Miss Bradley from second grade. Miss Bradley was my second grade teacher.
Okay.
At Post Avenue Elementary School in Westbury, and I was in love with her.
Okay.
Absolutely in love with her. And before we came back after Christmas vacation, and she made an announcement, and she said, "Class, I want to tell you that my name isn't Miss Bradley anymore. My name is now Mrs."
Yes.
And I still don't remember the name.
Yes.
Okay. And you'll have to call me Mrs. And she wrote it on the board. And I was devastated that she went and got married and wasn't going to wait for me.
Yes.
And and I was the only kid in class that never called her by her married name. I called her Miss Bradley for the rest of the year, and I still can't remember her other name. I really can't.
You've done a lot of reading in your life, obviously. What is a book that had a profound effect upon you when you read it?
A book that had a profound effect on me. I've read so many books, I can't think of a single book.
Can't think of a single book
that had a profound effect.
A book that you really loved. The reason I'm asking
recently,
okay,
there's a book called Jupiter's Travels by a guy who is a journalist who lives in England. He's still a journalist in England, and it's about a guy who went around the world on a motorcycle and wrote about it. He was paid partly by the newspaper he works for, and partly by the motorcycle company, and he wrote about it. It was a wonderful book and talked about his experience. And it's one of the things that got me so excited about what I'll be doing, which is traveling after I retire.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. That's where it comes from. Okay. Remember Travels with Charlie?
I read Travel. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a favorite of mine. I remember.
That's good, and I went back and reread it, but it wasn't. It wasn't as good as this book and Blue Highways too.
Yes.
Blue Highways is another wonderful book about William, Least Heat Moon, I think is the author. A guy who's part Indian and talked about traveling the country on the Blue Highways, the secondary roads of the country. And so I read a few of these books recently, which have influenced me about traveling.
When you came when you heard about a possibility of work in Brentwood, how did that happen? How did you hear about it, or were you?
The thing, as you know, jobs it was very different then.
Yes.
Okay, today young teachers are scrambling, and they might send out 100 resumes and get no interviews or even one or two.
Yes.
I did my student teaching at Sachem High School. They offered me a job, and then I heard that Bayshore and Brentwood were hiring, so I applied there. I got offers from Bayshore, Brentwood, and Sachem. The three places I applied, I got offers from. And then I thought it would be nice to come back here because it was familiar, it was comfortable. I knew the people here, I knew the kinds of students that were here.
What was your first assignment? At the high school?
Yeah, I've been here.
I've
been here the whole time.
When you came back to the high school, did you recognize Brentwood High School as the same school that you had gone to? Or
It wasn't very different.
It wasn't, okay.
No,
All right.
from
It hadn't-
62 to
it hadn't
68
changed.
when
It
I
hadn't
started.
really changed yet then.
It hadn't
Yeah.
changed much, no.
Okay.
And a lot of the teachers I knew, especially social studies teachers from your old department,
Yes.
were still here.
Okay.
Social studies teachers that I had, like Jack Zuckerman.
Uh-huh.
He was one of my social studies teachers.
Do you? I'm jumping back and forth, Rick. I hope you don't mind. But do you remember who interviewed you for the?
Fred Weaver.
He did. Do you remember the interview? Do you
I
remember?
saw Fred Weaver this morning.
Did you really? Yes.
Yes, I'm sitting on hall duty out there before this interview, and Fred walked by. Very slowly, Fred walked by.
Yes.
Fred is, I don't know how old Fred is now, but He's been around for a
Yes.
very long time. He
Yes.
was the principal at the
Yes.
time, and he hired me.
Is there a moment from that interview that you remember? Or a
No, I don't
question?
remember that so much, but I do remember when the draft board was starting to come after young teachers at that time.
Uh-huh.
Fred wrote the most wonderful letters to the draft board explaining how...
This was Vietnam,
Right.
the era of Vietnam.
Right, Vietnam. And he wrote wonderful letters explaining how Brentwood was a district that needed good teachers, and explaining that Mr. Edwards came from Brentwood and we need him, and it would greatly hurt the district if he was going to have to go off and serve in the military. And I guess it worked.
Do you agree that that Brentwood has always been somewhat of a microcosm of the rest of the country? That things that happen here happen before they happen elsewhere? Have you ever seen a pattern of similarity between what happens in Brentwood and what we see then happening across the rest
Well,
of the
maybe
country?
because of the makeup of Brentwood, bilingual education, and the influx of immigrants from other countries, and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Now, what grades have you taught? Has it been consistent throughout your career?
10, 11, 12.
10, 11, 12. Okay. And you taught English.
Yep. And journalism.
And when did you make that? Because there was a segue into journalism and into being the yearbook advisor some time back. You've been doing that for quite
Well, I've
a
been
while
doing
now.
the powwow for 29 years. I started the second year I came here, and I've been doing it consistently for 29 years.
In all that time, are there certain incidents that pop to your memory that stand out about you?
Sometimes, yeah. I can remember there were times when students were more active, and we had some times with students who wanted to put articles in the paper, which would cause a great deal of antagonism from the administrators and people like that, and to kind of mediate that was difficult. Not to turn the students off and not to let them print anything they want, because many times if you did that, the kid himself would regret it later on. So you had to. But as time went on, after those in the 60s and the 70s, I didn't find that happening quite as much.
Less of a problem.
I don't find myself having to gently censor anything, to have a kid, and we haven't had any trouble with administration because of that. I think the kids don't seem as concerned today about being confrontational in print.
You were in college around 68, were you, or at that point?
Just finished.
You were finished college at that point. Okay. The reason I'm asking you is because I'm remembering back to the Bobby Kennedy's visit to the high school.
I just remember that. Yeah. I think that was my first year when he came.
Yeah. Well, who did this before you? I mean, who was advisor to the? I mean, who was a shepherd on the powwow or the yearbook before you were?
Gee, now I told you about names.
Yeah.
The librarian.
I know Maury Burns was. Well, he was involved with.
She was the librarian, and she was involved. Why can't I remember her name?
I'm in the same boat you are. We're the blind leading the blind here in terms of remembering names. Okay.
She ran the powwow when I was a student here, and then I
Okay.
think just gave it up when I took it over.
Okay. Mary Rufino, was it?
Mary Rufino.
Okay. Mhm.
Right.
Okay. Well, here's a test for your memory, if you can handle it, and if not, we'll go on to another one. But some of the teachers who, when you began teaching, some of the people who were new to the district also with you. Do you remember anybody who was also
Starting off with me,
starting off with you?
Steve Krakel, who's very
Okay.
upset with me because I'm leaving this year and he's not.
Okay.
Steve and I have been good friends many
Yes.
years.
Okay.
Others, Chico Frankel started
Yeah.
with me,
Okay.
and Ronnie Guzza started
There we
with me, and quite a few teachers.
Okay. But you've decided that this is the time for you to
I'm
leave.
ready.
We'll get back to that in a couple of minutes. Did the preparation that you received for teaching adequately prepare you, do you think? Now, you did you went to a lot of colleges, but you got most of your teacher training. You said you student taught at Sachem.
Right, that's where you get your student training. You don't
Okay.
get your student training until you get in front of a
into
class.
the classroom.
Yeah, that was very good. And I had a wonderful cooperating teacher. Her name is Fadine Van Tassel. And she was a woman up from the South, and she knew exactly how to teach a class. Now, young man, you better straighten out or I'm going to box your ears. She was wonderful. And she was married to a Baptist minister. And she'd have me over for dinner, too, and she'd tell me, she was wonderful.
Sounds like you had a relationship with her that went beyond the time that you worked together.
It did, but
You
after, well, she retired she was ready for retirement about that time.
Really?
So
Okay.
after she retired about a year or two later, I never saw her again.
Do you have, talking about seeing people, do you have any contact with former students? Do you?
Yeah, well, the ones that I do are usually my editors from
Okay.
previous publications.
Uh-huh.
Those are the kids I got closest to, you know.
Sure.
And
Spent the most
I still
time with?
get, I get an email from Winnie Kwan, who works in Hong Kong as a city planner, and invited to Deneen Pachukas's graduation party, graduated from Georgetown Law School. And I still get emails from kids. Email's wonderful now for keeping in touch with those people.
It sure is. Now, you were you were a member of BTA for, I guess, as
My whole
long as
career.
your whole career. Was there a point in time where you became active with them?
No, I never did. I had too many other things that I was being coach, being an advisor to the yearbook, being an advisor to the newspaper, teaching summer school, teaching night school. I never had time.
Younger teachers or beginning teachers are overwhelmed with commitments on their time.
Right.
If they're not taking courses, when you and I were teaching, we were doing part-time jobs.
Right.
In your case, you were coaching. Some people had second and
You had to.
tertiary
the pay
jobs.
was
That's right.
my first. It took me. It took me 3 years of teaching to make per week what I was making in the summer as a lifeguard. I made more as a lifeguard in the summer than I did teaching.
Wow. It's not unusual to hear someone say that, though.
Yeah.
It's been catch up for the past few years. But I dare say you didn't work any harder on your first day, or how do I want to phrase? You worked as hard on your first day in the classroom as you did on your last day in the classroom, I dare say.
Probably harder.
Yeah.
I think beginning teachers, when you don't have that great wealth of experience and things to fall back on, and I've done this before and I know this material.
That's true.
And you have to prepare fresh stuff all the time.
Yeah.
I think it takes a great deal of it. You have to be in your 20s.
Was there a, let's say, a chapter in the book of your professional life that was more important that we not miss than another chapter? I mean, if you divided your whole career into chapters, was there a segment that was really, really important?
One chapter? Well, I guess as advisor to the newspaper and the yearbook, that is something I'll remember. And those kids are the ones I'm going to remember more than most of the kids. In the classroom, you tend to forget the kids. When you work after school with kids individually, I can still remain. Lorraine Suska from 1972 was my powwow advisor. You remember kids that you work intensely one-on-one with. I think teachers who go and who come at 7:30 and teach their classes and go home at 2 o'clock every day miss that connection.
We were always encouraged as young teachers to get involved, to do chaperones, to be chaperones at one thing or another.
And the young ones today are doing that.
Yes.
We have some wonderful new young teachers here.
Yeah.
They really are involved.
They certainly are creme de la creme too, given the choices that are available.
Yeah,
top line.
When the selection committee has 200 to pick from, they can pick the best of 200.
Right. And I think it's important, if they are not told that, maybe this will give some of them a clue that just how valued they are for having been chosen. Many, what is that, the biblical quote about
many are called,
many
but
are
few
called,
are chosen.
but few are chosen. Yes, exactly. Well, you served as a member of the BTA for those many years when you had some very active leaders that represented you and I and the rest. Who were those people do you remember particularly? some of the leaders.
Well, some of them are now up in central administration. Les
Okay.
Black and Mike Vasulo, I remember. Okay, and Joe Hogan. I think
Yes.
they've all done a good job. It's not an easy job.
No.
You really have to. And by knowing teachers from other districts, I've seen where their unions have done really incredibly stupid things, where they alienate the community, they alienate the administration. I think the Brentwood Teachers Association, the people in, they've walked that tightrope very well of doing the best thing they could for the teachers, but also paying attention to the fact that we've got others that we have to be paying attention to.
And we've managed, or they've managed, to keep us off the strike lines. We've never had a strike in Brentwood in that sense.
I think we were lucky having a guy
Yes.
like Tony Felicio,
Yes.
who was, pro-teacher. My brother, who teaches in Patchogue, Medford, he gives me horror stories of how the insanity of that school board affects the administrators and the teachers. You can have, we've been very lucky in Brentwood not to have any kind of labor strife, where I've seen it in other districts.
Has your
very
opinion,
nasty.
has your opinion of union or unionism changed over the years, Rick? Or you pretty much have the same view that you did when you began?
I think I have the same view. I thought it was a necessary thing. I thought that if it was done right, it could benefit all parties, and I think so. That's the way it's been in Brentwood. If it's done wrong, as it has been in other districts. I have a friend in Farmingdale. I can remember the union telling people to go around and put super glue in the locks of the school in the morning. Unions doing that kind of thing to influence.
Oh boy!
Right?
Yes.
I can never see I said, what? I said the BTA. I can never imagine the BTA telling teachers to do such a thing.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say there was a controversy in the beginning whether becoming a union would take away from the professionalism of our organization that we had. I don't think it has taken away.
Oh, no.
At all.
No, I
As
think
you've
it's
said.
contributed to
Yes,
it.
yes.
It really has.
You alluded to the salary you made when you first came to Brentwood. Do you remember what it was?
Yep. $6,200 a year. $6,200 a year.
And you're retiring now, and it's 1998, and the reason that you decided this was the year was?
Well, I'm tired. 30 years is enough. I have other things that I would like to do.
What do you want to do? Tell us.
Travel.
Okay.
I had, 4 children that I mentioned, and one income. My wife never worked. So we never had the money to do the kind of traveling that I've always wanted to. I mean, I've never been west of Ohio. And the one time I went to Ohio was to visit my brother at college at Ohio State. So I haven't been west of Pennsylvania in a long time. So I don't even know. I don't believe that California is there until I see it. Idaho, Utah, all those places. When I get there, I'll say, wow, it really does exist.
So your plan is, after a little bit of a time gap, you're going to take off and travel?
Long Island is wonderful in the summer. I love
Okay.
Long Island. I have all my golf buddies here. I'm going to play golf. September 1st, I already bought an RV and a trailer. I'm getting the trailer. I have a motorcycle. I'm hooking the trailer up to the RV and putting the motorcycle inside. And I'll go to a beautiful spot and camp there for a week and tour the area on the motorcycle. And then pull out, go to another beautiful spot and do that.
We going to get a book, Rick on the Road, after this? Or
I'll keep a journal and I'll take some pictures.
Good deal. Good. Now, throughout the 30 years of your working life, is there something that you could point to say that gave you the most pleasure?
Well, again, I think doing the publications, working with kids and producing a product, when that product came out, you feel a great sense of satisfaction.
Some schools have had a great deal of difficulty and conflict over the censorship issue and over the relationship between the advisor and the editorial staff. You seem not to have had any of that.
No. Just back in the 70s, I can remember a student named Joseph Joy, Remember that name?
I think many of us will remember that name.
Joseph
yes.
Joy came in, and he wanted to talk about many things,
Right.
in the newspaper. And I had to sit down with Joseph and convince him that wasn't the best thing to do. And that was not easy.
He was involved with a group from Stony Brook, Students for Democratic Society or something. Is that what?
Very often the kids that get that angry, if you say, okay, if you want to do that, that's fine. We meet today. You're going to have to put 3 hours in today and 3 hours in tomorrow and 3 hours in on Thursday. And then next week you'll have to do 5 days of 3 hours also. And then the kid says, oh, I don't have time for that. And I'll say, well.
Okay.
If you drop a workload on them, that sometimes is the best form of censorship there is.
And that's coming from a professional with a lot of experience. Yes, good. What are you going to miss most, Rick, about your years of active service?
I'm going to miss some of the people here.
Yeah.
But as you get older, and you know this yourself, there were fewer and fewer of the people I've known for years anyway. Yes. One of the nicest things I did this year, my last year, was to work with 2 young teachers to kind of pass the baton for the yearbook in the newspaper.
Wonderful.
Yeah, Jason Elias and Trish Plowman. 2 young teachers in it, and I got to know them. And one of the sad things is I'm not going to be here to watch their lives unfold.
Yes, yes.
Trish is looking forward to having children, and Jason might get engaged, and they're at those early stages of life, and not to watch that unfold on a day-to-day basis is going to be something I'll miss, because they're both wonderful people. But I'm also happy because I'm turning those things over to 2 very competent people.
I don't know if you want to go here, but you might be able to respond to this in a way that will satisfy you, and that is, what aren't you going to miss?
What I'm not going to miss, well, let me put it this way. Some of the classes I had, my last class that I taught, okay, 8th period on the last day of classes of my last year teaching.
Yes.
Jason, who teaches in the class before me, had left a tape recorder in the back of the room. My 8th period class stole the tape recorder.
Okay. Yeah. That leaves a bad feeling. Leaves a bad.
The same class, I had a kid get punched out. There is an increase in violence here that worries me.
And naturally, in the classroom, you have to deal with that one way or another.
Right.
You're not going to miss that. And
I'm not going to miss that.
No. Okay. What would you like to have accomplished, Rick, that you perhaps couldn't or didn't?
Maybe to get across to some of the students when you talk things like values, because many of them come in with street values, which are not the good values that you have. Let me give you an example. There's a story, Faulkner, barn burning, in which a young boy travels with his father, who's a sharecropper, and every time the father gets upset with the landowner, he burns the barn down. And the boy sees this as wrong, okay? And they have the first time the boy is called in to testify in a small little courtroom that I guess the clerk in the dry goods store is the judge, The boy doesn't want to testify against his father. And then as the story goes on again, the father's angered again, burns another barn down, and the boy runs off to tell the landowner so the landowner can get the horses and the cows out in time and everything. And the father, of course, abandons the boy. The boy had to make a choice between family and right and wrong. And he ultimately decided he had to choose between right and wrong. And I had too many students that saw that as wrong. You stay with family. Family's more important. And then we brought up the Ted Kaczynski thing about his own brother and his mother turning him in. They thought that was horrible. Even though he killed people and injured many people, they thought that was wrong. Those are solid street values that you stand behind your family no matter what they do. And it's hard to sometimes get it across to some of the students here that, right and wrong is right and wrong. Family, of course, you give your family some latitude, but when it gets down to it, right and wrong is right and wrong. And they didn't buy into it.
Changes, therefore, ahead for public schools. This seems to me to suggest that this is not a good direction that some kids are going in terms of their values. Do you see the schools taking an increasingly responsible role to inculcate values or to change some of those values?
I think maybe there needs, or maybe we need to have some kind of courses on ethics that kids are required to take, and so that they can deal with this, because what they come in with, they're not the kind of values you want the society to have.
I can remember that every once in a while the pendulum has swung back and forth, there's a period when we're in favor of teaching values and then we're opposed to teaching values.
I think we need to do it. I mean, I can tell, there was one time we had a discussion in one class, and I said, listen, if I leave a $10 bill on my desk and I go into my back office and I come back in and the $10 bill is gone, what's happened? And the answer was, you were stupid for leaving your $10 bill there.
Yeah.
The answer isn't somebody in that class is a thief.
Yes.
The answer is, you're stupid for leaving it. Well, that translates into, you're stupid for having a low jack in your car. Yes. Okay, and so the car is there to be stolen. That's what it translates into.
And a lock on your front door, which at one time was not necessary in Brentwood.
You could leave your front door open. Nobody would even think of crossing your threshold without being invited. Now, you're stupid if you leave if you don't have double locks on your front door.
Yes. How does the future then, what future is there for the students of Brentwood, the people who are going to be coming in to the high school and going through for some of them, the last years of their formal education in the classes here? How is that going to change? Do you see any changes ahead that the younger teachers are going to have to be?
The younger teachers are going to have a harder time than we did, because I don't see it changing. I really don't. That doesn't mean we don't have a solid core of extremely fine kids here who have every value you'd want to see in a kid. But it seems that the numbers, the percentages are getting smaller of that type of kid.
But here again, Brentwood may be a microcosm of what's happening from coast to coast in this country, that this is not a local issue. This is a national, a national dilemma. Perhaps it's one of the reasons, Rick, why I think so much attention is being paid to education today. Everyone seems to be interested in what's happening.
Right, because if the kid isn't being taught, I mean, you and I taught values at home, that stealing is bad, and that, the right and the wrong of things, that these kids aren't getting that. In fact, sometimes they're getting taught the opposite things at home. Ripping off the government is a good idea if you can get away with it. If a kid sees that, a kid is going to carry that with him.
We've been all over the place with these questions. What did I leave out? Is there anything you think we should get to that we so far haven't? Something that we should talk about that we haven't? Or another way of saying the same thing, is there a question that I didn't ask you that I should have asked?
One of the things we mentioned earlier was that there was a camaraderie here before that there wasn't. I hope that comes in again. I start to see evidence of it with the younger teachers starting to become again what we had here, where there was an understanding that everybody is in this together and there isn't any separation between teachers and administrators, where there's goodwill at all times, and anybody is able to tell anybody exactly what he's thinking, as long as, the goal is to make this the best place it possibly can be.
That even though the size of this district is enormous,
too big,
it is possible to still have a sense of family or smallness.
Right. Some things work against that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the kids themselves recognize the fact that we have a R.O.B.S and a Sonderling building. I have some of my better kids in journalism this year wrote about that particular thing, that there shouldn't even be a R.O.B.S and Sonderling. It should be Brentwood High School. We should take the name R.O.B.S and Sonderling off those buildings. And kids should have classes in both buildings, and they should be totally mixed. It should not be a case of I'm a R.O.B.S student and I'm a Sonderling student. I think they're right. I really do. Because they obviously, the people over in this building think they're different from the people over in that building. They think there's a difference. And really isn't a difference. They should mix together. That's one of the reasons we don't see everybody out at the football games, because whose football team is it? You know? Kids will sit there and they don't even know. If perhaps you have a class in the other building because environmental science is taught in only one building, then you get a little mixture. But why can't we do that with a lot of things? A lot of things.
When you started teaching, there were obviously significant issues facing the United States, both in a political, economic, and social sense, but also in an educational sense. There were issues that needed to be addressed. 30 years later, you have made a difference. However, there are still issues, big issues facing the country and facing education. Can you talk about that, and we'll conclude what we've done here today. But I'd like to hear your final outtake on how.
Well, I think the country's come a long way on its attitude about war. I think Vietnam helped that enormously. One of my first students, when I started, Gary Guasp, was killed in Vietnam. It made me focus on it. I hope kids today, because we haven't had that kind of war recently, don't forget about those kinds of things. I had to face the draft back in those days. I might have to go today. Kids don't have those things. So I think that's one of the things we've settled on. The big issue we're going to have to face today is integrating all the different kinds of people that are coming into this country, into our society, so we don't get, separate societies. I think that's one of, as you said, this is a microcosm. We see that here. That's one of the best things about Brentwood. Kids that come in here get to see people from all over the world. Okay,
that's for sure. Yes,
that's one of the very best things.
And it works,
right? Because I'll have kids from other schools, teachers who come here and say, I never saw a black kid or a Hispanic kid until I actually came to teach here. It was my first encounter with a black or a Hispanic person.
Yes.
Well, this is becoming a mixed country, a country of all kinds of people.
Yeah.
So, that's one of the better things that we encounter here.
Thank you, Rick, from the bottom of my heart. It's a great opportunity I had to listen to your story and to talk with you today. And thank you for giving us.
Okay.
Still giving. Yeah, for all
Thank
these
you,
years.
John.